Hello everyone, happy fall. I'm Jack Watson, UI UX designer, illustrator, animator, donut connoisseur. Welcome to Adobe Live. Today's skills challenge is a topic that comes up all the time that people want to know how to mask in Illustrator. We're going to try and uncover that mystery today by creating some ice style text. So no, chat, not ocean text, but I guess you could kind of interpret this and make some ocean text if you're feeling fancy. You're going to want to download today's starter file in the description below this video. You can grab it because I've created some examples for you today. And let's take a look at those examples. So in Illustrator, I know a lot of folks can have an easier time if they have something to reference that they can break apart to kind of understand. So I created this example, this set of examples here using these oranges on an examples layer for you in Illustrator. So we've got our original artwork here. If I open up my layers panel, you can see there's nothing applied to that. It's just some artwork. And then over here, we've got our clipping mask example, and then we have our opacity mask example. And if I break these apart by going to Object, Clipping Mask, and Release, and I release this opacity mask, you can already kind of see these are very different. Now I'm going to go over here, and just for the sake of being able to see this one, I'm going to go ahead and add a stroke to it. We'll increase the line weight a little bit. So you can see with our clipping mask example, the shape of this bite mark circle is everything that we want contained within that mask is inside of that shape. And then this section of the orange gets hidden when we make our mask. So that's how a clipping mask works. And then opacity mask is a little bit different. We've got this white shape here, and we've got this black shape here. Now, opacity masks work using values. So our dark area here, let's ungroup this. Our dark shape here is going to hide that section of our orange, just like, you know, it's hidden over here with a shape. And the white area here, or the light area, is going to show our orange. So that's how opacity masks work. So this is just kind of a quick example, but we're going to walk through, starting from scratch, how you go about creating this. So, well, not this example. We're going to be using text today. So we're going to first need to hop over, since we're working with text, to Adobe Fonts. This is what we're going to be looking at. I'm going to go into Browse All, and for this to really work, you're going to want to use a heavier font today. So fortunately, in these filters on fonts.adobe.com, we can go down to the bottom here, and under Properties, we can actually choose the heavier weight. Now, we want to do that because our text is going to act as a window, similar to our shape on our orange. The text is going to be what shows the contents of our mask, and then everything outside of our text is going to be hidden. So if we use a really thin font or a lightweight font like this one here, it's going to be really hard to see anything kind of in that window. So my advice is to use something that's a little bit heavier. You can also choose to sort by these tags if you want to pick a specific sort of look and feel for your font. I would avoid using things like this Art Deco just for learning purposes, because this is going to create a more complicated problem for you to solve with all the intricacies of these different lined and fill shapes. So try to go with something that's a little bit plainer and is going to be a wider font. The other thing that I like to do on Adobe Fonts, and this is a personal preference just for me, is I like to navigate down to newest, and I like to take a look at new fonts. It's just a personal preference. Now, I think a round font could work, but what I'm really looking for is something that's very blocky, that gives the impression of like a block of ice, since that's what we're kind of going for today. So I'm just going to take a look through here and pick here. Again, I wouldn't pick something that's like got these built-in shadows. It's going to be a little bit more difficult to work with. This one here, Comrade, this is actually a pretty nice font for what we're going for today with that kind of blocky look. So once you've kind of found something that you like, you can go ahead and hit Add Family either from up here, or if you only wanted to add one of these styles, you can also add them from down here. When I do that, our font is going to be ready to use in all of our Adobe apps. So back in Illustrator, just for visibility's sake, first of all, I'm going to lock this layer so I don't accidentally work on top of it, or I don't accidentally start messing with my examples. And then I'm going to switch to the rectangle tool. So we're going to be making some ice today, and ice is very light colored. So we're going to add a background to this so it's just a little bit easier to see. So going into my shape tools, if you don't see the rectangle highlighted, you can click on this, any of these that have a little arrow in the corner, and you can open up this sub menu, and you're just going to navigate until you get to the rectangle. I'm just going to drag a rectangle out here. I have smart guides on under view, smart guides, but if you don't, it's not a big deal. You just want to fill the artboard. If it goes beyond the edges of your artboard, that's fine. When we export this, all of our contents are going to be saved to the art, or exported only with what's visible in the artboard. So you can see here, these black lines, this is my artboard here. So let's undo that. And if your shape happens to look like this, where it's got a stroke on it still, you can click on that stroke to bring it to the front and set it to be none and have no stroke. We don't need a stroke on this. We just want to have a fill color. And then I'm going to double click. You can also get to it. Let me move this out of the way. We're going to be moving panels around a lot today. You can also set it to none in your swatches panel over here. Okay, so double clicking on my fill, that's going to bring up the color picker. And I'm just going to go with kind of a blue-greenish color here. I'm just going to kind of drag it, so it's going to be, I want it to be pretty dark because I'm going to put lighter text kind of over top of this. I'm happy with that color. And then with the type tool, I'm going to click just once, and that's going to make some point type for me. I don't need area type today since we're not going to have paragraphs of text. We're just going to be using one line of text. Speaking of, I am going to need some text from the chat. So I'm going to switch to the selection tool, and I'm going to scale this up. You don't want to just kind of stretch, well, you can, depending on what you're going for. But if I just kind of scale this, it's going to kind of stretch my text and squash it. And I don't actually want to do that today, so I'm going to make sure that I hold down Shift, and that's going to keep my text constrained as I scaled it. But like I said, we're going to need a phrase to, or a word, preferably a word, not a phrase, to use for our stylized text today. So think of something maybe very cold, very icy. That's what we're kind of going for today. Clever in the chat. I'm also going to make sure that I change my fonts to be the font that we picked on Adobe Fonts. You can do that from a number of places now. You can do that from the character panel. You can do it from anywhere it says character over in the properties panel as well. But you can also do it from the contextual toolbar. So the contextual toolbar here, it changes depending on what you have selected. So you get different quick actions depending. In this case, I've got a shape selected, so I'm getting shape-specific quick actions. If I click on type, it's going to give me things that I want to change when I have type selected. So I can go down here and I can start to type out comrade, and I'm just going to pick this comrade bold. And it looks like we've got a good one here from Clever. Chillax, I'm going to go with that. We've got a couple of good suggestions. Stian coming in with warmth, that's a good idea. But I'm going to go with chillax. There we go. Now, another kind of little tip for today, you can go ahead and you can use a font that's got some lowercase. I am using an all caps font just because it's a little bit easier. We're going to be creating a reflection here. It's going to be a little bit easier to work with when it comes to making our opacity mask. But for now, I mean, we're just going to stick with this all caps font. So, Katarina's saying frozen. Yeah, that's a good idea. All right, so I also want to change the color of this. I'm going to grab the eyedropper tool and just grab my background color. So my text is going to disappear momentarily, but I want to make a lighter version of my text that's in line sort of with the blues that I'm working with. So I can use the eyedropper to pull that, and then double click into my color swatch again for my fill in order to change the color there. I'm just going to make this a little bit lighter. Now, I don't want to make this white because I want to add some highlights over top of this. So if I make it white, I'm not going to be able to go any lighter than that when I add highlights. So you want to go with something that's lighter but not pure white. So I think something kind of in the middle there is going to work out nicely. All right, so now we're ready to add some details to this in order to create something to mask, basically. And I'm going to add some lines onto this to indicate the highlights, or I guess highlights slash reflections that you'd see on ice when it's got like those facets on it. So we're going to do that using the line segment tool over here. And again, if you don't see that, you can click and hold. Whichever tool you see in here, you're going to be able to grab that line segment tool. Now, the line segment tool, if you just click and drag, is going to create some lines for us. If you hold down Shift, you're going to be able to move this line around in 45-degree increments. Hopefully this is easy to see. Let me try to do it over the artboard here. There we go. And when I do that, you can see that I've got 45-degree increments. I can either drag it out perfectly horizontally or perfectly straight up and down. And if I drag it to the side, I'll get something that's kind of nice and at a 45-degree angle, which is what I want. And then I'm going to let go. And I'm gonna go ahead and, just for being able to see this a little bit easier, I'm gonna go ahead and set this up first before we talk about why it's so large. I'm gonna click on my stroke and I want to apply that white fill to that white swatch to my stroke color. And then for the ease of being able to see it, I'm gonna go up and I'm just gonna use the arrow keys. You can use them, the up arrow to increase and the down arrow to decrease your line weight, and that's gonna help you hopefully see my line here. Now, there's a reason that I decided to have this so large, and that's to demonstrate that when you're doing this, you're going to want to make sure, since this text is going to act as our mask, you want to make sure that your line extends beyond our mask, right? We're masking. The purpose of this is to hide everything that goes outside of our text. So if you have a line and it ends up kind of being short, that's going to be visible after you make the mask. So you just want to make sure it's totally fine to have this text kind of outside of your shape here. That's kind of what we're going for. So I'm going to drag this over here, and now I'm just going to make a whole bunch of these kind of highlights across my text. And it's really easy to do. Once I've got my first line created, all I have to do is hold down, click on my line, hold down Alt, that's going to create a copy. And if I hold down Shift, again, that's going to keep it kind of constrained so that everything is going to be in a consistent line here. And then I'm just going to make a couple variations of this. I can make sure that I pull it out all the way. Oh my gosh, I made too many copies. There we go. Let's go back. Let's go back a minute here. Got too excited. And then I can increase this weight. So we're going to add a little bit of variation in our highlights here. And then I can drag out another one. I'll make this even wider. And once I kind of have some of these set up, all I have to do is just kind of drag, holding down Alt and Shift to create a variety of them. And I don't want to add too many. I want to kind of space them out a little bit here, like you can see, just kind of filling out these letters to make them look like they've got some highlights applied to them, right? Just going to drag these out really quickly. Just like so. Again, totally okay to have my lines go over the edge here. All right, and once you've got a whole bunch of lines here, just to make it easier for us working today, I'm going to group these together. So I've got one of my lines selected, and I can just go to select same stroke color, and that's going to select all of my white lines at once. You could go through and you could drag and select these, but then you might accidentally include the background in your group. So if you use that select same, it's going to make your life a little bit easier. And I'm going to hit Command or Control G to make a group. All right, now we've got everything set up. We're ready to tackle this clipping mask. So I'm going to select my text here, and I need to make a copy. But there's a couple of kind of guidelines, or I guess rules, that clipping masks kind of play by. So I'm going to click my text, and I'm going to hit Command C, and I'm going to deselect everything. So I made a copy of my text. It exists on my clipboard. Command or Control C. I'm going to click off of everything, and I'm going to hit Command or Control F, and that's going to paste it in front. My object that I want to use as a mask has to be in front of my artwork that I want to mask. It's very important. So if we open up our layers, we can see it's on the same layer, but it's on top of everything that I want to mask. The other thing that needs to be true in order for a clipping mask to work is we need shapes. So technically we need one shape. So with our text, we need to convert this to objects by going to Type, Create Outlines. And now you can see when I do that, instead of having a type object, I have a group that has multiple objects inside of it. So we're one step closer, but if I try to make a clipping mask with this, so I'm going to select my lines and I'm going to select the shape that I want to use for my clipping mask, and I go to Object, Clipping Mask, Make, it doesn't work. What happened? Well, in order for this to work, our clipping mask does need to be a single object. And there's a really easy way to go about doing that with simple shapes like this. So I'm going to select my text. I'm going to go to Object, Compound Path, Make. And you'll notice in my Layers panel here, I no longer have a group. I have a compound path that Illustrator treats like a single object. So I'm going to go ahead. You can see that I can see my text through here now because it actually removed my fill color. So I'm going to go ahead and make sure I've got a fill color. It actually doesn't matter what color it is. We can make it, yellow if we wanted. The color is not going to matter in the end. So now we've got our shape, we've got our group that we want, elements that we want to mask. So I'm just going to select both by holding down Shift, and then we're going to go to Object, Clipping Mask, and Make. And we've successfully done it. We've masked our objects using our text as a single compound path. And so everything that was outside of our text, remember, everything that's out of our side of our text is going to be hidden. Even if it's a compound shape, like imagine a donut, the whole is not going to be visible at the center, right? Because you made a compound path. Same kind of thing applies with this text. All right, so we've tackled the clipping masks. Now let's talk about opacity masks. If you're joining us, I've been acknowledging the chat, but I haven't mentioned this before. If you're joining us in the live chat, live, don't distract chat. If you're joining us live, you can ask questions right at this moment on Behance or on the Adobe Live YouTube. You can also post on the replays on YouTube as well if you have questions later. The replay is always available for you to rewatch as you kind of practice. So we've got our design here. Let's talk about opacity masks. We kind of already talked about them a little bit down here. Let me move this out of the way. With our example, but they work with values. So unlike a clipping mask where you've got to use shapes, particularly one shape, specifically one shape, right? With a opacity mask, you can use gradients, you can use effects, you can make softer transitions. So it's going to be really handy if we want to make a soft fall off on our reflection. So let's go ahead and kind of just go through it and you'll get the idea. I'm going to select my clipping group here. I'm going to select my text, and I'm just going to make another group with Command or Control G. And then I'm going to go to Object, Transform, and I'm going to use Reflect first because I need to have my text flipped down below my other text. So I'm going to make a copy. And we want to make sure that we choose the right option here. You get a little preview with these icons. This one's going to flip it sort of the wrong way, to say the least. We're going to go with horizontal. And there's one more important step here. We're going to go ahead and hit copy. If you just hit OK, it's fine. It'll just flip your text. You won't get a copy. So if I hit copy, that's going to make a duplicate of my original design and flip it. And then I'm just going to drag it straight down. If you have trouble dragging it down, you can hold down Shift. So we've got our copy here. We're kind of step one of our reflection. The next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to drag out a rectangle. So I'm going to go over here to my rectangle. I'm going to drag out a shape. Now, the shape here needs to cover my entire text. So just to kind of show you again, if I make this black, I don't want to have any kind of pieces and parts of my text kind of peeking out. Much like the clipping mask, it needs to cover the entire shape that you want to be masked. That's kind of, I guess, the main takeaway for masking in Illustrator. Make sure that you contain everything within the mask, essentially. So our text needs to make sure that it's completely covered. And then in the gradient panel, if I want to make a soft transition, right, I can use a gradient. So if I click on the linear gradient tool, it's going to create a black to white gradient for me. And we mentioned before that lighter values are going to be visible and darker values are going to be hidden. So this is kind of a quick way to get that kind of fade off on our text. So with the gradient tool, right now my text is going to be visible on the left and hidden on the right. I want it to go the other way. I want it to be visible at the top and then hidden at the bottom. So I'm going to click with the gradient tool at the top to set that to be my white, and then I'm going to drag down to set the bottom to be dark. So this is essentially what we want our mask to look like, but how do we apply it? So I'm going to go over here to my layers, and I'm going to make sure that I've got my mask shape, and again, the object that I want to mask selected. My gradient object is on top of the object that I want to mask. And then in the transparency panel, this is where you can make a gradient, or a gradient. This is where you can make an opacity mask. If you don't see any of these windows, you can go to Window and navigate down to the window that you're not seeing, in this case transparency. You can see that it's checked on, so that means that it's kind of visible. And we've got a question. Clarice is saying, can you use the pen tool to make a shape? Absolutely. That's how you would go about making a shape like this. Again, you just want to make sure in the end with a clipping mask in particular that it's one shape, one compound path, or one closed shape. With the opacity mask, you can actually use multiple shapes and you can kind of layer them together. Like here, this is two separate shapes, a shape for the bite and a shape for the orange that I want visible. So yeah, hopefully that makes sense. Hopefully I answered your question. So we're going to go ahead and make our mask. I'm just going to hit make mask in this window so you can kind of see what happens. We can tell that something happened. We've got a little bit of a fade down here at the bottom. And we've got a different view now in our transparency panel. So, and this is probably the point where people get the most hung up, I think, with the opacity mask. In Illustrator, on the left side over here, this is where you want to be in if you want to be editing the artwork. If I click on the right side over here, you can see now this right side is highlighted, it's active. I'm in mask editing mode, and you can actually see it up here in my file name at the top. It actually tells me I'm in mask editing mode. So when I'm in mask editing mode, I can't edit my artwork. I can't do anything with my artwork. I can't make changes to it. I can only make changes to the mask. If I'm in art editing mode, I can make changes to the artwork, but I can't make changes to the mask. So that's very important. I can't edit the mask and the artwork at the same time. I have to kind of choose one or the other using this panel off to the side here. Now, in mask editing mode, like I said, I can edit my mask shapes, and you kind of saw already, if I drag this up, I can, shorten that fade a little bit. A little bit of a pro tip for you with the gradient tool. If your gradient isn't coming through 100%, if you've got like a weird bit of a fade on it, let me go into my swatches here. So I just clicked on my color stop, and you can see I've got currently, this is key black or 100% K. In order for to get a 100% clear fade at the bottom, I need to use rich black. So I'm going to click on this black to apply it. And now if I drag this up, I'm not going to get a weird line on this. It's going to fade completely off. The other thing to kind of make this look a little bit more natural, speaking of the gradient panel over here, I can click into my white gradient stop, and let's say I don't want this to be as strong as my original text. I want it to be slightly faded as well. I mentioned dark and light values. That also applies to like gray values. So if I go over here and I choose like a lighter gray or a darker gray for my color stop on the left side where my white was, you can see that I can control the degree that the mask is making my object transparent by changing the gray value. So it's not just black and white that change, that control the opacity, it's gray values as well. And gray values are going to give you semi-transparency on your objects. And to demonstrate that, we can go back to transparency, go back into our regular art editing mode, and if I go over here and I make a copy, so I select my background and I hit Command C and Command F, and I change this to be orange, now you can see my fully opaque original letters. You're not seeing the orange through them, but for these letters at the bottom, now you're getting some transparency that's coming through. So you can add elements to your background and they'll be visible through those elements that have an opacity mask applied if you've got your values set to be kind of grays. So that's the basics of how masking works. I would challenge you to keep adding onto your design and think of different ways to make this look even more like ice. But if you wanted to export this, my advice would be to go to export for screens, especially if you're going to be sharing this with our Discord group. And it's going to open up this window that's going to give you a ton of options, maybe a little bit overwhelming. You can choose between assets if you've got assets you're exporting. We've just got one artboard today. And again, like I said, that artboard is going to just export as, the single artboard. We're not going to have to worry about any of the contents going outside. The other things that are in here, you can create subfolders. So if you had a lot of artboards that you were exporting at once, they would all get put into a folder. We don't really need that. And then down here, you can choose the formats. So I would pick a PNG or a JPEG. You can even add if you wanted to export a PNG and a JPEG. And then up here in your settings, if you click on this little cogwheel, it's a little bit, hidden up here, but it's, next to your formats down here. That's where you can change the settings for each of these. So you could go into PNG, and if you wanted something with transparency, you can open up this PNG here, the settings, and for PNG, choose transparent, white, or black if you wanted to. So that's where you can find kind of all of your individual settings for the different formats. Purv is asking if I can point at the mask menu. Yes, it's going to be, if you're talking about the opacity mask, it's going to be in the transparency window. So that's where you're going to work with your opacity mask in those two kind of views. So I'm just going to go up here. I'm going to export for screens and save this out really quickly to my desktop. That's good. We'll just save it out there. And then once you're ready for feedback, let's say maybe you're a little stuck or you need some help or you just want to get some opinions on your work, you can just drag this PNG straight into the DCC feedback channel in the Daily Creative Challenge category in our Illustrator Discord. And then you can type in like challenge 1 for November and hit enter to send it, and then you can get some feedback from everybody in the community. If you don't want to share it on Discord, you're not comfortable with that, you can also share it on social media and tag Adobe Live, or you can tag me as well if you want. Again, you can find the link in the description for the files kind of below. Apurva, yes, that did answer your question. Okay, good. I wanted to make sure. And you can also check out what everybody else has been working on here for the various different challenges. There's our Halloween-themed challenges. Those were a lot of fun. Or just hanging out with everybody, honestly. Ooh, look at that! Stian's already on it! That was so fast! Nice work, Stian. Awesome, I love that. Happening live, folks. All right, thank you so much for hanging out with me today for an Illustrator Skills Challenge. We went over type, the line segment tool, we went over gradients, and of course, clipping masks and opacity masks. We're live once a week on Tuesdays now at 12 p.m. Pacific at behance.net/Adobe Live and on the Adobe Live YouTube channel. But stay here for more live streams after me. We've got the Photoshop Challenge up next with Andrew, and I will see everybody later. Bye, everyone.